Thank you. Great to be here. Such a famous old bookshop this. It's lovely to be able to speak here. Real thrill. This is my book, Your Zodiac Soul. I wrote it in Bali last year, but I actually wrote it quite quickly in about 6 weeks, but it was about 15 years worth of thinking about it, researching it, going really deep into the Zodiac, which is something that I've had this deep love affair with, the Zodiac, for at least half of my life. And as an astrologer, it was the Zodiac that initially switched me on to astrology. So I've been working as an astrologer for about 25 years. I run a school in Glastonbury called the Kairos School of Astrology, taking people through a process to become astrologers. But I also, for the last 10 years, have run a Zodiac mystery school from Glastonbury, working with the Glastonbury Zodiac, called the Alchemical Journey. And it really works on the basis that the Zodiac was originally the basis of a mystery school. It was something that you entered into in order to achieve a kind of harmony with nature and the cosmos, in order to perfect yourself, to create a sense of wholeness, and to experience yourself in all the aspects that you could experience yourself in. We're so used to, when we think about astrology, we just think about our zodiac sign. We're so used to thinking of ourselves as that. I'm a Scorpio, I'm a Libra, I'm a Taurus. And it's great, isn't it, to have a sort of totemic group that you can belong to, and there is obviously meaning in that, and we can recognize ourselves in those traits, and that's really helpful for us and useful for us. Even more when we go into depth and look at our birth chart, we get revealed incredible information about our lives and about the challenges that we face in our lives and so on. So, astrology has this incredible value to reveal to us aspects of our lives, our potential, our future perhaps, what we can, the sort of challenges that we might experience in life, our karma, all of these things can be revealed through the birth chart, and we can understand it as well through knowing our own signs, or our ascendant, or our moon sign, and so on. But there's something in the zodiac itself which reminds us that we're actually all of this. We carry this whole wheel within our being, all of us. Some of us may be more familiar with some aspects of it, but we carry the whole thing within us. And the alchemical journey, this process that we take people through a whole year while the sun moves through each sign of the zodiac, was done as a way of diving really deep into the myth, the mystery, and the wisdom and the intelligence of each zodiac perspective, because each zodiac sign carries a truth, a deep, deep truth that the ancients knew about. And it also carries a teaching, it carries a shadow aspect to it that we need to come to terms with in order for us to become fully aware and fully whole. And the zodiac's origins seem to go back to the first agricultural revolution. When this was a map of the year. It was the zodiac was a way of describing the cycles of the year, the interchange between light and dark in the year. And and each sign, if you look at the images of each zodiac sign, and if you look at the stories associated with them, you can start to piece together, here's Virgo is an obvious one, as the harvest goddess, the time of the harvest, the spring lamb of Aries, we can see that, the bull of abundance in Taurus, and so on. But we have images, even the garland of flowers around the bull's neck that you see in the myths has a Taurian feel to it. The flowers, the blossoms of May, and so on. So the zodiac has this seasonal agricultural origin to it, and the old alchemists knew that the way to transform and to become sort of aware, enlightened, powerful, whatever you could expand your capacity as a human being by really deeply knowing how this wheel sits deep in the soul. The zodiac is an ancient emblem of the soul, particularly the idea of the turning wheel of the zodiac. And so what I've done in the book is I've presented the zodiac not as 12 personality types, although you can find them in there, of course, because the themes are in there, but as a journey that you can follow, as a process that you can follow, a developmental process, a process that is mapped to the life cycle, with Aries being the birth moment, a process that's mapped to the seasonal cycle, a process you can map onto the moon cycle, a process you can map onto the parts of the body, and all these correspondences that the zodiac presents us with. I've introduced the key myths at moments in the story where the medicine of that story can best be appreciated and experienced. So, working on this basis that the zodiac is something that we all carry within us, we're all getting stuck at different points on that wheel. So one of the ways the book is designed around an inquiry process, so that you're inquiring into each sign, the teachings in each sign of the zodiac, to see where you're getting stuck, to see which part of the zodiac wheel you're getting stuck in. Some you may feel more comfortable with, you may move more smoothly through, and others you may struggle with. Even the ones that you have a lot of planets in, you might struggle with, because you might find that having too much of a sign, too much of energy of a sign, can actually blinker your perspective on the other 12. So I use various models for this. One of them is the idea of the round table. To imagine the Psyche as a round table with 12 members, each with a key voice on that table. Imagine that as a model of community as well, where each member has equal validity to be at that table and to be able to speak from their truth. One of the things I identify in the book is the truth that each sign carries. Now, one sign's truth may seem to be at odds with another sign's truth, but it's still a truth. You know, we're in Libra now, and the truth for Libra is the truth must be beautiful. It can't be true unless it's beautiful. It can't be true unless it's balanced. It can't be true unless it promotes peace. But the truth for an Aries, you just had an Aries full moon, right, a couple of days ago. The truth for an Aries is very different. It can't be true unless it's fully alive. It can't be true unless it rouses my passion. It can't be true unless it inspires me to act regardless of the consequence. For a Libra, the consequence is everything, right? Librans look at the consequence before the action, because they're so aware of, you know, of what happens when we act. So how do we carry these two perspectives? They're opposite perspectives. So part of our growth and our learning is learning to allow both of those perspectives to live within us, so that we can live, so that we, you know, we're not just, if we're just coming from the Aries all the time, you know, we're going to piss everybody off, right? Because we're just going to be too much fully like in that moment. I mean, people will admire us because, like, he just does whatever he likes, does whatever he wants, does whatever it's, you know, is in his, you know, or in her kind of energy at that moment. Whereas if we're just coming from Libra all the time, we hesitate around our actions because we're so involved in the consequence. So how do we balance those things? The moon's actually moved into Taurus today. Taurus, sign of, you know, after all that frenetic energy of Aries, we sort of drop into Taurus and finally drop into our bodies, as if the spirit force of Aries lands in the body, and we go, yeah. Taurus is the belly urge, isn't it? It's that kind of like, how does it taste? In order for it to be true for a Taurus, it's got to taste right. It's got to taste good. It's got to feel good. It's got to land in the body. If it doesn't land in the body, then what use is it? I always pay attention when a client comes for a consultation to where their Mercury position is, because if I'm in a consultation, their Mercury positions are going to be playing, you know, because I'm going to be speaking, or they're going to be speaking, I'm going to be listening, they're going to be listening. It's all about the interpretation. So I always pay attention to where the Mercury is, because I have Mercury in Pisces. I like to go off and talk in myths and metaphors, and, you know, and make big associations and hope that the soul will arise and carry us somewhere. If I've got a Mercury in Taurus in the room, that's not going to work, is it? They're going to want to know, you know, something practical. They're going to want to know if it's going to pay the bills. They're going to want to have a question about money, or about their family, or about their security, perhaps. That's a generalization, because we're all of it. We're not just one sign. But if they're in the Taurus, if someone's coming to you and they've got that way of understanding, they're going to need more concrete information. So this is the thing with astrology. You know, astrology presents us with these many and varied perspectives, and we need and to be able to experience those many and varied perspectives, and to be able to be sensitive to them, then this can increase our tolerance. So rather than judging somebody for being this or that, or having this aspect or that aspect in their chart, you know, we've all been born at a particular moment into a particular time. You know, all of our souls. I was just this morning walking up walking around Hampstead, looking at all the different people, the variety of people, the variety of perspectives that we all have. How can we increase our tolerance and compassion for one another? To be, if there's a sign you have a problem with, or a planet, or an element you have a problem with, that's the bit to dwell on, because somewhere in you that's an unresolved part of the wheel for you. That may be where the greatest teaching is. There's always this thing, people pick the book up and they go straight to their own sign. It's the obvious thing that we do, isn't it? We immediately want to know something about ourselves. Of course, they haven't read the bit in the introduction which says, resist the temptation to go to your own sign, because they've gone straight to it. They haven't read the instructions. So, that happens, and it's fun, and it's bound to happen. But the idea of the book is that you read it as a story, as a journey. Maybe you follow it through the year, or follow it through through a moon cycle. You could pick it up when the moon is in a particular sign, and it will give you a teaching, a story, a myth, an idea that you can connect with. And the beginning of each chapter begins with a transition from the previous sign. So it's also about how we transition from one sign to the next. Because in order to move into Gemini, say, we need to let go of Taurus, because we can get very self-satisfied and comfortable in Taurus, because it's well about our security. What happens when Gemini comes along and it, like a wind, it blows all the blossoms from the trees? Like a voice in our ear that we can't ignore, like a tune that gets into our head that we can't lose. When you've got a tune in your head and it's going around your head, and it unsettles the comfortable part of us, because there's new information coming. There's news, and we follow the news, don't we? We want to know what's happening now, regardless of where we are now. So there's always this change and this movement in the wheel, and it's how we can best respond to that. So we're in Libra now. Libra, the sign of the autumn. We've reached the second equinox in the year. We begin at the equinox. I launched the book on the equinox because it is the beginning point of the astrological year, a place at a time of impulse and energy. And now we're at this reflective point in the year. And it is a good time, isn't it, to think about life from other perspectives this time of year. We've got reflected light. How the light, we've got these lovely days, haven't we? And this beautiful light at the moment. It's so different, isn't it, to the light of the summer. And it's different in a way to the light of the spring equinox. I find it's a different quality because the temperature's different, the atmosphere is different, because we know that the nights are beginning to descend. But as yet, there are still leaves on the trees. We haven't yet had to face the death sting of nature that's coming. That comes in Scorpio. That's why we have to really look at that in the season. But in Libra, we kind of get enchanted. The leaves are turning colour, aren't they? Then we're getting these yellows and reds and these beautiful colours. So Libra sort of seduces us with beauty at this time of the year, or drawing us into relationship, drawing us into a closer relationship with the other. As the first sign of the zodiac, where we have to deal with an opposite perspective to our own. As the seventh sign, it's the first sign where you actually look back at where you've come from in the wheel. And it's a moment of partnership, of relationship, of connectedness. And Libra teaches us to be more reflective, to be more considerate of others' perspectives. And this is a beautiful thing, and one of the medicine of Libra, I sort of identify a key medicine, a key healing, a key teaching in each sign. And for Libra, I call it the art of suspending judgment. Because Libra is actually a sign of judgment, but the real art is to be able to suspend judgment and to be able to hold two perspectives in mind at the same time. Jung talked about this idea that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. When the opposing halves of us are unresolved, then that conflict must play itself out in the world. So the Libra teaching is really around how we hold that tension within us without having to resolve it, perhaps. So sometimes, the shadow of Libra is can be an indecision or a vacillation, but that's very close to the medicine which says just hold those two in mind. Allow that third way to come through. Don't just resolve one way or the other, and that's part of the learning of this time of the year. And Libra is a wedding. You know, it's where it's the archetypal sign of the wedding. And I tell the story in the book of the famous Greek wedding of Thetis and Peleus, where all the gods and goddesses are invited, except one. They don't invite Eris to the wedding. Her Roman name is Discordia, the word discord. We get the word discord from. So, you know, we might think it's a wise thing not to invite discord to the wedding, but it was a profound mistake, because of course she comes anyway and she brings a gift, her golden apple, and she rolls it before the three great goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. This is the first beauty contest. It's the archetypal beauty contest. And it arises because Eris is not invited to the wedding. The unacceptable face of the feminine is not invited. She's Mars's sister. She's considered to be trouble because she speaks the truth that nobody wants to hear. So we're in Libra shadow territory, which is ignoring the truth that nobody wants to hear because we want everything to be beautiful. Paris gets called in. Archetypal Libran figure gets called in to judge the contest. He's vain, he's been dispossessed of his birthright, has a dark destiny hanging over his head. He of course votes for Aphrodite, and in the process incurs the wrath of the other two goddesses, which brings down his own kingdom. So the greatest war, because what happens of course is that Aphrodite offers Paris the hand of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of, at the time, Sparta, later Helen of Troy, married to the Greek king. And it's in that seizing of Helen, with Aphrodite's blessing, that the Trojan War is then justified and happens. So the consequences of ignoring, of brushing the conflict under the carpet are significant. I thought I'd just give you a taste of the way the book is written. I just thought I'd read you a little section, as we're in Libra now, from the book. This is called The Uninvited, this bit's called The Uninvited Guest. Not inviting Eris to the wedding is the Libra shadow energy. And it is no coincidence that she bears the same forbidden fruit for which Eve was banished from the garden. Eris is that aspect of the feminine that we cannot see, the dark aspect whose exclusion within patriarchal culture lies at the heart of a woman's resentment. When the true beauty of the feminine is rejected and denied any appreciation of its depth, life becomes a vain contest for attention and appreciation. Woman struggles to stay fully in her power and is more likely to succumb to man's uninitiated, lustful urge for instant gratification. She fails to inspire him to undertake the rites of initiation for which he unconsciously longs. Until he does, he cannot be trusted to truly care for her and can never truly know her. Only when Eris is invited can the deeper conflicts between man and woman be addressed. Confronting the repressed aspects of the female psyche can be deeply uncomfortable, but it encourages trust and opens up the possibility of a more profound understanding. Yes, of course, we want everything to be beautiful at the wedding feast, for there to be harmony, for it to be a perfect day. But in that quest for perfection, there is almost certainly someone missing from the party. When the priest asks, "Is there anyone here who knows of any just cause why these two people should not be wed in holy matrimony?" there is a moment where all present hold their breath, just in case the uninvited guest shows up after all. We all know that place, right? How many only Librans here? A few Librans here, but it doesn't matter if you're Libra or not. I have planets in Libra. We've all got something in Libra in our charts, and there's a place in us that just wants it to be all right, and we'll gloss over, even if it's an apparently small thing. Sometimes I think, well, that doesn't really matter. That little kind of detail, we can push that aside. But of course, there's something here around this inclusion. What is it that we are not allowing in our own lives? And these are the types of reflections that the book prompts us with. Because from Libra we move into Scorpio. And in a way, what is the Libra shadow in some way becomes the Scorpio medicine, which is actually the honouring and the recognition and the integration of the shadow energy. Sometimes, you know, where we struggle in one sign, the next sign reveals to us the clues that we need to integrate that. Because we don't have to face the death sting, the scorpion sting in nature yet, do we? Because we're in that lovely, we're having an Indian summer, having this lovely kind of time when everything's beautiful, and and so in a way we can, you know, we're in Venus territory. Venus, the ruling planet of Libra, kind of, you know, she's all about balance, beauty. She's about desire. She's about what pleases us. You know, for a Venus-ruled sign, whether it's Taurus or Libra, what's important is what pleases us. The truth has to be pleasurable in some way. For a Scorpio, the truth has to be the truth, no matter how ugly, difficult, or dark. Yeah? We have to dig deeper. But we have to also, before we can dig deeper, we have to recognize the balance. We have to recognize the need for beauty. You know, once we've been into Scorpio, I'm not going to go into the Scorpio medicine so much, we're running out of time, or we can maybe do it in the questions, but Scorpio will take us into that underworld place where we face our deepest fears, where we find the humility that we need to recognize our own dark material and bring it forward. That's the shadow work. But as we do, and as we recognize that, we become trustable. People start to trust us when we deal with that stuff. And from there we can rise in Sagittarius with a new hope, with a new faith, inspired on a fiery arrow which can take us into the Advent, which is the Christian version of Sagittarius. The Advent, or the adventure that brings us to the solstice, where spiritually we are reborn. It's interesting with the light-dark balance, because there's this, you know, we could say, well, it's, you know, you can describe the signs almost in the ratio of light and dark. But there's a paradox, of course, because physical light and spiritual light were often seen as inverse. So we're in the heat and heart of the summer, we have the signs with the most light in the world, but that was said to be the dimmest spiritual light, because the light has exhausted itself in the world. And in the second half of the year, we then enter the signs that are where the light in the physical world is diminished, but the spiritual light increases. So there's this ongoing, beautiful dance, this paradox that the zodiac wheel reveals. I see the zodiac as a spiritual path. I see astrology as a spiritual path. It's not just a way of, certainly isn't just a way of predicting the future or trying to nail somebody's character. There's so much more to it. I mean, it gives us all kinds of clues. It gives us pathways that we can follow in order to find, you know, that truth of who we are and who we can become. And you know, it's been a passion since the age of 21. It's been this passionate quest to know and to experience it, to follow this wheel, because it never ceases to surprise us or amaze us, the depth that it can go to, because it's the depth. It is an authentic emblem of the soul, and it is our Western medicine wheel.
John, I know you are doing it because you're doing it at my place, but I thought you might want to talk about the fact you're going to do this teaching next year.
Yeah. So Lynn has just opened. Was in the process of opening a centre in Wincanton, and we're going to run a whole year-long programme at the Tree House, which is your wonderful centre in Wincanton in Somerset. So it's going to be like a monthly. We're going to have an evening, a Friday evening, and a whole day on the Saturday, to go into this. We're using the book as our guide, doing the journey. And on the Sunday as well, we're going to take people into the Glastonbury Zodiac, which is the landscape zodiac in Glastonbury, and journey into the sacred land there as well. So it's a whole weekend experience. So if anyone's interested, just see us. We haven't actually put any. We've literally only just kind of, you know, come up with it and settled on doing it. So if you want to come to us, we'll give you information. Yeah.
About the North Node and South Node in the book?
I don't talk specifically, because the book is specifically about the zodiac. I don't go into. It's not really an astrology teaching book, so I don't really mention it. I mean, I've got another book which I'll be writing this year, which I will go into the nodes, but no, I don't specifically go in. But of course, the nodes are running. You know, knowing the position, just knowing the sign position of your North and South node is incredibly helpful, because it's the journey. You know, that you could. that journey toward what we're trying to bring balance to. If we're trying to bring balance, the nodes are wonderful because they present us with the paradox of the opposition. You know, you're explicitly working with both ends of the paradox. You know, if you've got a north node in Taurus, say, then you've got to deal with the south node in Scorpio. You know, and what that carries, and the balance comes with the opposite, which is the gratitude of Taurus, the embodiment of Taurus, bringing that into the body from the deep psychic energy of Scorpio. Thanks. Yeah.
There's a Greek myth story about Hercules having 12 labours,
yeah.
And this is said to express the journey of the sun hero through the Zodiac. Did you find that sort of meaningful?
Yeah, I used to, for years I ran a Hercules monthly sort of Hercules group where we scripted all the labours and we enacted them on the full moons every month. Did that for years in Brighton, yeah. Really, you know, really interesting. I mean, and the Alice Bailey version of the 12 labours seems to fit the best. The order of the signs, yeah. She wrote a book called The Labours of Hercules.
You mentioned, you mentioned shadow work.
Yeah.
How would we do that with the book? I mean, is it something we have to just read about in our own
Yeah,
side?
I mean, I think the book is a sort of in a way it's a gentle introduction to shadow work,
yes.
because it's, you know, you're looking at your own, you know, there's the questions at the end of each chapter really provoke you to look into, and some of the questions also are best done with somebody else. So, for example, in Aries, the question is, you know, what was your first impression of me when we first met? You know,
That's a good
which is a good question, isn't it?
Really,
you know, because Aries is all about the first impression. It's all about the immediacy of the moment. And just that question can open up. I mean, how often do we do that? How often do we ask that question of somebody we know? You can even go up to somebody you don't know and ask them, what's your impression of me right now? It's a brilliant thing to do. It's very energising. It's one of those things that actually activates things in us.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
How would you stay in balance, like our moon sign, our sun sign?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, you know, we need to do it. Sometimes it's easy. We might have them in trine. We might have them both in the same element, but they might be in very different signs. They might be square to each other, so or opposite or something. So we, you know, there's. I mean, the moon sits deeper in us. It's more of a need. The moon operates as this sort of deep instinctual need. It's like a memory. It's something. The moon, in a way, is like the archetype of the inner child. So it's how our inner child responds. Whereas the sun is kind of growing into an adult. The sun is the way how we mature and how we become conscious. So we may have the how we become conscious part of us at odds with the how we feel safe part of us, which is the moon. You know, but until your moon feels safe, your sun hasn't really got the freedom to grow. So we have to pay attention to our moon, because otherwise we're just in anxiety all the time around that bit.
As a professional, I'd love to know what your take is on 13 sign.
Yeah, I touch on it in the introduction to the book, because it's a very nice, neat thing to have a 12, you know, to have the beautiful, unbelievable symmetry of the 12, which just provides this incredible framework, which astrology is all based around the 12. It's really based around the number 12. And then there's the uncomfortable fact of a 13th moon in the year, of the 13th. I'm interested in the whole idea of 13 and what we have to sacrifice. In a way, Eris, you know, the story I just told, Eris is the 13th. I think of it not so much, because we could go, oh yeah, there's a 13th constellation, Ophiuchus, you know, that has it, you know, that obviously occupies part of the ecliptic. We could say that, but then I'm more interested in the archetype of it. There's always a 13th sign in every zodiac. There's a 13th sign in the Chinese zodiac. They had a race. Do you remember they had a race in the Chinese zodiac to eliminate the 13th sign? It represented that shift from a lunar to a solar calendar. You know, we work with the solar calendar, so we work with 12. It's a symbolic number representing the sun. You know, but there's a 13th sign. I mean, I will just share with you my take on it, and it's more of a symbolic take. Draco wraps itself around the ecliptic pole, which is not quite the same thing as the North Star, because the North Star moves with the precession of the equinoxes. The North Star gradually moves, whereas there's a point that doesn't have a star at it, but there's a point that never moves, and that's the centre of the ecliptic. And around that point that never moves in the sky, the constellation of Draco wraps itself around so that part of its body occupies each of the 12 segments of the zodiac when you draw it out. It's 12 equal parts. That for me is incredibly important, And so I think, symbolically at least, of Draco as being the 13th sign. Because it's almost as if a piece of it has embedded itself into each sign. And Draco is a dragon, you know, it's the dragon energy. There's something about the dragon energy which is so feminine that occupies each sign and uncomfortably reminds us that there's something we need to recover. So one of the things I've attempted to do in the book is to recover a lost perspective. I think we've been handed down a zodiac, you know, and a sky, of course, that's very patriarchal, that has suppressed all kinds of feminine wisdom. So in a way, in some signs more than others, but in all of them a little bit, I'm trying to recover the feminine perspective, you know, which is a recovery of the 13th energy, which I think has woven itself into each sign. And yeah, I think it's a really good question. Thank you. And I don't really want to get too much involved in the 13th constellation, although I do talk about Ophiuchus in the Scorpio chapter, because Ophiuchus carries a serpent as well. You know, and there's lots of parallels, and it's interesting, isn't it? You know, that we've even had to eliminate a 13th constellation from the wheel in order to get the neatness and the perfection of the 12.
What's your take on fixed stars?
Well, the fixed stars, you know, I mean, generally what happens with the fixed stars is that we project them onto the ecliptic. So some fixed stars sit exactly on the ecliptic, so you can identify where but we project them onto the ecliptic, sort of straight down, and then we give them so each fixed star occupies a degree of the zodiac. And I think they are important, and we can obviously read information into them. I don't talk about them particularly. I do talk about some of the stars.
Yes.
Like I talk about Regulus and Spica, which are very significant stars, and they sit exactly on the ecliptic, you know. And there's another star I talk about in there is the what's called the Nodus Celestis, which is Aurisha, which is the alpha star of Pisces, which was probably could well have been the star of Bethlehem. So I do talk about that. There's a lot of sort of cultural elements to the book as well. I mean, I talk about you can map this onto the Christian ecclesiastical calendar. The Christian ecclesiastical calendar is an astrological calendar. 12 festivals all have astrological origins. They all come from the zodiac. When you go into certain cathedrals and churches, you find zodiacs on the floor. You find them in the stained glass at Chartres, don't you? It's because the zodiac is embedded into our Western tradition. You find zodiacs on the floor of ancient synagogues because the zodiac was the way of understanding how to live a life. Sort of different from the doctrine, but it was a way of how you lived a life, you know, because you needed this information in order to live well, in order to know when to plant, when to sow, when to reap, and so on. So there's various mappings. You know, I mean, there's a lot of Greek mythology in the book, but there's also Christian stories as well, and a couple of Jewish stories. I mean, the Hebrew stories. So that that it does weave itself through. The Bible is full of astrological references.
How was the process of writing the book for you?
It was amazing. I mean, I actually decided to do it over the course of a moon cycle. I was so confident that I had it in my head and I could just get it down with all this thinking about it. I'd made copious notes, of course, as well. But I started when the moon was in Aries, and I kept it all the way through. So I got to the Aquarius chapter while the moon was in Aquarius. I thought, I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish it and I got to Pisces and it all fell apart. It took me 10 days to write the Pisces chapter, whereas it took me 2.5 days to write the other. I started going out more and dancing, and, drinking. But it got done, and it's actually, I mean, I wrestled with the Pisces chapter, but it's the one I'm happiest with for all the wrestling. It's my rising sign. And it was such a precious sign to me. And funny enough, I got it from I finally got the Pisces shadow when I went to see a film called Grief Walker. I don't know if anyone's seen a film called Grief Walker by a guy called Stephen Jenkinson, who works with death and dying. And there was just something at the end of that film that it dropped in, and I got what the Pisces medicine and the shadow was in that. It was something about the processing of grief. And it's the last sign. Pisces is all about how we process grief. Like all the water signs, Pisces stirs deep emotions, connecting us to the yearning or sorrowful aspect of the human condition. When we allow ourselves to actively grieve our losses, expressing them as art, poetry, music and ritual, our grief moves and transforms. It becomes a sacred act of compassion for ourselves and for those we love, those we lose, those who hurt us, and those we hurt. It begins with forgiveness of ourselves and others, and it is entirely different from pity. It cuts much deeper into the soul. Pisces medicine reminds us that our joys and sorrows are connected. If two souls have been drawn together in a tryst of love or conflict, deep friendship, or through a family bond, they are carried on the same current. Finding each other, losing each other, finding each other again, like the two fishes forever tied by that silver thread of longing. Compassion is the active encounter with suffering, and it can only arise through a deep acknowledgement of what is shared between us. The word implies that we suffer together and that we come together to passionately praise life. We have reached the last zodiac sign, and so must love the end as we loved the beginning. Be as willing to let go of the stuff of life as we were to seize hold of its arrival. It is said that the fertile, life-giving waters of the Nile were first filled with the tears of Isis as she wept for her murdered husband Osiris. When we hold space for our sorrows and walk together in our shared grief, what is revealed is our shared joy. When we surrender ourselves to the compassion that is present, there we will find grief and the praise of life dancing side by side in the deepest of our hearts, carried by the music of the wheel that turns within us, around us, and beyond us.